My name is Helen Brooks. I'm 39 years old. I have one daughter. And 2 months ago, my parents almost let her die. Not by accident, not by ignorance, but by choice. A very deliberate choice. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I didn't even cry. I just sat there, in a vinyl chair that squeaked every time I shifted, watching an IV bag drip rhythm into the silence, and waited. Because if they weren't going to do the right thing, then I was going to do something else entirely. Let me back up. We were in Denver when the accident happened. Thursday night, Isla, my daughter, was riding in the front seat with her best friend's mom, seatbelt on, doing everything right. And still, they got T-boned by a pickup that ran a red light at 40 miles per hour. I got the call at 9:13 p.m. By 9:47, I was in the ER, answering questions with shaking hands, signing forms I couldn't read, trying to remember how to breathe through the buzzing in my ears. Stable, they said. Conscious, but was the start of everything. There was spinal trauma, a fracture, possible swelling. They needed to monitor it overnight. Then came Friday tests, scans, consultations. By Saturday morning, I was sitting in a cramped family consult room with a neurosurgeon who looked barely older than Isla. There are 2 options, he explained. The first is advanced, minimally invasive. Success rate is 98%, low risk of permanent damage, but it's not covered by most insurance plans. And the second, riskier, a full open procedure, covered. Yes, but the chance of long-term harm, including partial paralysis, is much higher. It's not the route I'd recommend for my own child. He didn't need to say more. We'll go with the first one, I said immediately. He nodded. Then we need to move quickly. The inflammation is still at an optimal point for recovery. Tomorrow morning is best. Tomorrow, as in less than 24 hours. I left the room feeling like the floor had dropped out beneath me. I'd never felt that specific flavor of dread before. Not the terror of losing someone, but the terror of watching the system assign value to your child's life based on a spreadsheet. I checked my savings. 2 jobs, no debt. But this surgery, the difference between insurance and the out-of-pocket cost was more than I had. So I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I called my parents. My father picked up. "Hey, kiddo," he said, cheerful like I'd called to chat about the weather. "Dad," I said, my voice already shaking. "It's about Isla. She needs emergency spinal surgery. There's a better procedure, but it's expensive. I need help covering the cost." A beat of silence. "Are you sure it's not covered?" he asked, like I'd forgotten to turn the insurance card around. "I'm sure. I've spoken to the surgeon, the billing office, even checked the policy directly. It's not a glitch. The procedure's too new. They won't cover it." He hesitated. Then I heard my mom's voice. She was on speaker. Of course. "Have you double-checked?" she asked gently. "Sometimes, if you push back—" "Mom," I cut in. "They're prepping for surgery tomorrow. We don't have time for appeals or red tape. I'm not asking you to pay the whole thing, just co-sign a loan so I can get it in time." Another pause. And then the worst thing. That kind voice. "You know," Mom said, "we leave Monday for the cruise. They don't refund past the 7-day mark. It's the one we planned with Megan and the kids. You remember?" Oh, I remembered. The $14,000 luxury package. Ocean view, butler service, custom robes for everyone, even the toddlers. "Isla might end up paralyzed," I said flatly. "That's not fair," Dad replied, suddenly defensive. "You're putting us in an impossible position." "No, I'm asking you to help your granddaughter walk again." "We're not doctors," he said. "Maybe the cheaper procedure is perfectly fine." I couldn't even respond at first. The words sat like gravel in my throat. "You think the hospital is trying to upsell me like this is a extended warranty?" "Sweetheart," Mom said, switching to the patronizing tone I hated most. You're very emotional right now. We just think maybe you should take a step back before making such a big financial commitment, especially with your job being what it is. I have 2 jobs. I've never missed a payment. I've helped cover your bills before. That's not fair, she said, voice tight. You chose to do that. Because I thought one day you might do the same for me. It went quiet. So quiet. I could hear the sound of a vending machine humming down the hall. I see, I said finally. So, the answer is no. We just can't, Mom said. We're not in a position to take that kind of financial hit. Got it. I ended the call. I didn't scream. I didn't throw my phone. I just sat staring out the hospital window at a pigeon limping across the sidewalk. I wondered if it had a name, if it had parents, if they would have helped if they could. Then I walked back inside, opened my laptop, and applied for an emergency medical loan. The interface was sterile. Click here to accept the interest rate. Click here to confirm desperation. Click here to gamble with your future. I got approved, but only for a fraction of what I needed because I didn't have a cosigner. I stared at the screen. I could hear the beeping of monitors in Isla's room, steady and indifferent. My own heart was doing something strange, not racing, not pounding, just tightening. And still, I dialed one more time. This time, my father answered alone. I kept it short. There's a loan, Dad. I just need a cosigner. You won't pay a cent. Just your signature. That's all. Pause. Then he says it. The final nail. Your mother and I talked. We're just not comfortable putting our names on any paperwork right now, with all the uncertainty. Uncertainty like what? I asked. Like Isla's spinal cord. I've had identity theft before. You never know with online lenders. It's a major bank. I'm sorry. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Thanks anyway. I hung up, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt something split inside me, not a break. A crack. The kind that lets the light in, or lets something out. Because this wasn't just about a surgery anymore. It was about everything I'd swallowed for 39 years. Every time I was told to be quiet, be grateful, be small. Not anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the slow breath of my daughter recovering in the room next door. And then I picked up my phone, scrolled past every number that shared my DNA, and started calling everyone else. The first call I made wasn't brave. It was desperate. It wasn't to a close friend or a trusted colleague. It was to the mom of Isla's friend from theater club, a woman I'd spoken to once, during intermission, while we both stood in line for overpriced brownies. Her name was Melissa. I didn't even know if she'd remember me. My thumb hovered over the call button like it weighed 100 pounds, but I pressed it. She picked up on the second ring. Hello. Hi, it's Helen Brooks, Isla's mom. A short pause. Oh, hi. Is everything okay? No, but I said, not really. Then I explained. The accident, the surgery, the timeline, the loan rejection, the insurance dead end. I didn't even get to the part where I asked for help. She interrupted me. I'll help. Just tell me where to send it. I froze. What? Send me the info. Seriously, whatever you need. Tears stung my eyes so fast it caught me off guard. I tried to form words, some combination of thank you and I'll pay you back and you don't have to. But it all melted together. No pressure, she added gently. You're a good mom. I've seen how Isla lights up when she talks about you. You don't have to carry this alone. And just like that, That was the beginning of something I never expected. I opened my phone again, pulled up old numbers, old emails, names I hadn't seen in years. I called Isla's elementary school violin teacher. Her response: I just got my pension last week. I can send some. Then I called a guy I used to coach with, We hadn't spoken in 10 years. He Venmo'd me $300 within the hour, with a note. "Don't worry about it. Just hug your kid for me." Every single message felt like a matchstick lit in the dark. Tiny, flickering, but real. That afternoon, Isla's best friend, Harper, showed up to the hospital with her mom. I didn't know they were coming. I was in the hallway, reading through loan rejections when the elevator dinged. They walked out with a tote bag full of snacks, tissues, and toothbrushes, and her mom handed me a card. I opened it later. Inside was a $50 bill folded around a handwritten note. "For strength. Yours, not hers." It undid me. I locked myself in the family bathroom and cried so hard I gave myself a headache. Because these weren't people who owed me anything. They didn't even know the full story. They just helped. While the people who raised me, who I'd paid mortgages for, who I'd never asked anything from, looked away. That humiliation, it stopped being humiliation. It became fuel. I started a spreadsheet, not to tally debts, but to track love. Each line, a rebellion. Each donation, a reminder that I wasn't crazy, or weak, or alone, that being the quiet one in the family didn't mean I had to disappear. Then the door opened again, and this time, it wasn't snacks. It was a credit card. Harper's mom held it out like she was passing me a torch. $20,000 limit, she said. Use what you need. I blinked at it like it might explode.
Interest rates and repayment and credit scores.
She cut me off. "You're a good mom," she said. "Let people be good to you." I held it like it might disintegrate in my hands. My palms were sweating. My mouth was dry. But for the first time in 48 hours, I let myself believe something might actually work out. I called the billing department that evening and paid the full amount. In cash. I signed the consent forms with a trembling hand, using a pen someone had left at the check-in desk. I watched Isla sleep that night with wires taped to her chest, her face slack from fatigue and medication, and I whispered, "You're going to be okay. I promise." The next morning, she went into surgery. Best team, best odds, best chance, and still not a word from my parents. Until they realized people were talking. You see, some of the people I'd reached out to, they knew my family. They'd seen the Facebook posts, the cruises, the photos of matching outfits on the deck of a yacht, the birthday car with a giant red bow for Megan's son. So when word started spreading that those same people refused to help their granddaughter avoid permanent spinal damage, let's just say the whispers got loud. No, I didn't post anything. I didn't tweet. I didn't rant. But someone did. I don't know who. Maybe Harper. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe karma. But 3 days later, my phone started buzzing, repeatedly. 6 calls from my mom. No voicemails. Just rings. Then a text from my dad. "Call us immediately." I let it sit. Because in that moment, I wasn't their daughter. I was Isla's mother. And I had more important things to do, like keeping her alive and upright. That's when another call came in. Different number. I almost ignored it. But something in me said, "Pick up." I did. And heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. "Hi, Helen, it's Greg, Margaret's attorney." My stomach flipped. "Hi," I said cautiously. "Greg, it's been a while. I heard about Isla. I'm so sorry. But can I ask you something strange?" I braced myself. "Sure." "Did your daughter ever get access to her inheritance?" I blinked. What inheritance? Greg went quiet. Then he exhaled slowly. "Oh, wow," he muttered. "That's not good." My fingers went cold. "Greg, what do you mean?" He replied with 7 words I'll never forget. "Margaret left it all to Isla." I sat in the hospital lobby with Greg's voice still echoing in my ears. Margaret left everything to Isla. Not some things, not a portion, Everything. I blinked hard, trying to keep my tone steady. You mean a savings account? Some kind of college fund? No, Greg said. Her full estate, house, investments, antique coin collection, personal assets all in a trust, designated for Isla, to be transferred when she turned 18. She turned 18 6 months ago. Silence. Greg's voice was tight. Helen, they never filed any paperwork, never notified the bank, never even contacted me. My stomach dropped like I was free-falling through floors. They just kept it, I whispered. Yes, he said. And that's not just unethical. It's theft. I don't remember much of the next hour. I know I walked back to Isla's room. I know I sat beside her and just watched her sleep. And I know I felt something I hadn't felt since I left her father over 18 years ago. A cold, focused rage. The next morning, Isla stirred. Her voice was groggy from the meds, but clear. Is it over? The surgery went great, I said. They said everything looks good. She nodded weakly, then asked, Did Grandma ever talk to you about a trust fund? I froze. What do you mean? She used to joke about it, said I reminded her of herself, said if I could understand compound interest by age 10, I deserved a fortune. I laughed sharp. Well, she meant it. I told her everything. The will, the trust, the missing paperwork, the lies. She didn't react right away. Her face was unreadable. Then they said they loved me. They don't get to say that anymore. She looked down at the hospital blanket, fingers plucking at a loose thread. They paid for that car for Megan's son. I know. They remodeled their kitchen. I know. They could have saved me days ago. And then her voice dropped, low, final. They don't get to be my grandparents anymore. That night, when Isla finally slept again, I opened the drawer of my old nightstand, the one I kept in our apartment for over a decade, and pulled out a tiny, folded sheet of paper. It was a letter. I wrote it when I was 8. To Mom and Dad, it said, I got an A in spelling. I hope you're proud of me. I never gave it to them. I tucked it under the court paperwork I had started compiling with Greg, like a grave marker for everything I used to believe. Greg and I worked quickly. He pulled the trust documents. I scanned them, looking for loopholes, anything that would explain how they thought they could get away with this. There was nothing. It was airtight. And even better, Greg had Grandma's handwritten notes, emails she'd sent him, even physical letters, all confirming her intentions. One line stood out to me in perfect cursive. Isla actually listens when I talk about compound interest. That alone deserves a fortune. 2 weeks after Isla was discharged, I sat in my car across from my parents' house. The Colorado sun was sinking low, casting long golden shadows across the street. Isla sat next to me in the passenger seat, earbuds in, legs still braced. She wasn't scrolling this time, just staring out the window. I don't want to talk to them, she said. You won't have to, I replied. She nodded, then muttered, Good. 10 minutes later, they pulled up in a shiny rental SUV fresh off another luxury trip. I recognized the branded duffel bag from their cruise Instagram story. My mother stepped out in a flowing white resort dress, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. My father was fiddling with the trunk. Neither of them saw me until I opened my car door. Heels on gravel, I walked across the street with an envelope in my hand. My mother's smile froze halfway up her cheeks. Helen, she asked. What? I held out the envelope. What's this, she said, voice already wary. I smiled. Tight, precise. You've been served. Her hands trembled as she took it. My father looked up, eyes darting from me to the paper like a man searching for a fire exit. You're joking, he said. But his voice cracked halfway through the word. I turned, walked back to the car. My mother shrieked my name. My father called after me. I think it was something like, Wait, We can talk, or you don't have to do this. But I did. I had to. Because the people I used to call my parents didn't just say no when I asked for help. They used my daughter's money to buy themselves a better life. And they never said a word. After I handed them the envelope, everything went still. Not in the air, not outside, but inside me. There was no shaking, no second-guessing, just a strange stillness, like something had finally clicked into place after a lifetime of not quite fitting. Because this wasn't just about justice anymore. This was about identity. About the little girl who wrote letters hoping her parents would notice her, and the grown woman who now realized they had noticed, just never cared to look closely. The next morning, I sat at the dining table with Greg and Isla. My laptop was open, legal pads everywhere, coffee gone cold in front of me. Greg leaned forward, voice low but certain. "They're going to fight back," he said. "Probably argue Margaret didn't know what she was doing. Try to say the will was unfair or that she was confused." Isla didn't flinch. "Let them," she said. He looked at her, really looked, and something softened behind his glasses. "I need to ask you something hard," he said. "Once we file this, it becomes real, public, depositions, courtrooms, maybe press coverage." She nodded. "I'm not scared." Greg turned to me. "She's sure." I was too. We filed the formal civil claim 2 days later. Breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of funds, failure to execute trust responsibilities. The amount hundreds of thousands, not counting interest. The assets listed their home, their vacation property in Key West, their retirement accounts, the art collection Mom once called her generational legacy. Now it was evidence. The morning after the papers were served, my parents' lawyer reached out a man named Mitchell Granger. Slick, expensive, the kind of guy who charged per syllable. He sent a formal reply, claiming disproportionate bequest and questionable testamentary capacity. Translation, they were going to argue Margaret was confused, that giving everything to a teenage girl and nothing to her own children couldn't possibly have been intentional. Greg wasn't fazed. "She expected this," he said, tapping a highlighted clause. "That's why we have this." He held up a copy of an email Grandma had sent him 6 months before her death. "I'm clear on what I'm doing. Isla is the only one who actually listens. The others don't need the money. She needs a future." He had 5 more just like it. Plus notes. Handwritten letters. Even a video clip of Margaret at her desk, outlining her intentions. Eyes sharp, voice unwavering. Greg had receipts. But we weren't just preparing evidence. We were preparing Isla. She practiced answering questions in front of a mirror, sat through mock interviews, reread every financial record we pulled sometimes twice. She even made flashcards. I caught her late one night, sitting at the table, hoodie wrapped around her like armor, eyes rimmed red from fatigue. "You don't have to push this hard," I said. She looked up. "I do," she said quietly, "because they didn't just take money. They tried to erase me." A few days later, I was walking past her room when I noticed a manila folder on her nightstand. On the front, in her handwriting, it said, "Compound Project. Inside investment strategies, financial literacy programs, a rough sketch of a scholarship fund." She was planning a future bigger than herself from the ashes of betrayal. And in that moment, I didn't feel rage. I felt awe. The day of the first hearing, Isla wore navy blue, hair tied back, no makeup, no dramatics, just clarity. My parents showed up with matching grimaces and overpriced suits. Their lawyers smiled too much, used phrases like misguided generosity and delicate family dynamics. Greg didn't blink. He laid out the case like a teacher unrolling a lesson plan timeline, documents, emails, Margaret's voice, in her own words. Then came the kicker transaction logs showing large withdrawals from the trust account all post Isla's 18th birthday. cruise payments, home remodels, a full-on luxury SUV for Megan's son. The judge raised an eyebrow. My father started whispering angrily to my mother. Isla watched them both with the stillness of someone who had nothing left to fear. When Greg finished, the courtroom was so quiet. I could hear Isla's breath. The judge cleared his throat, then said, "This will proceed to full trial." Back home, I found Isla staring at the wall in her room. "They're going to keep twisting it," she said. "Say it's a mistake, that I don't deserve it." I sat beside her.
They've always said that, Isla, just not out loud.
She turned to me, her voice clear, unshaking. "Then I'm going to say something louder." The next morning, she handed Greg a note. It read, "I want them held fully accountable. If we win the civil case, I want to file criminal charges next." Greg looked at her, then at me.
Are you sure he asked?
She didn't hesitate. "They made choices," she said. "So will I." That afternoon, I found myself pulling out something I hadn't touched in decades, a letter I wrote when I was 8. To Mom and Dad, it said, "Today I cleaned the kitchen. I hope that makes you proud." It had been folded so many times the creases looked like scars. I laid it next to the lawsuit paperwork. One page said, "Please love me." The other said, "You don't get to hurt us and walk away clean." And somewhere between the two, I became someone new. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not just the air conditioning the walls, the stairs, the silence. Everything felt clinical, observed, stripped of sentiment. Isla walked 2 steps ahead of me, holding a thin folder marked "Exhibits Financial Misuse." Her back brace was finally off, but she still moved like every breath was borrowed. She didn't look scared. She looked surgical. We took our seats. My parents were already there. Front row, matching blazers, matching frowns. Their new attorney, not Mitchell Granger, but someone younger, flashier, hungrier, adjusted his cufflinks and leaned over to whisper something smug into my mother's ear. She didn't smile. Dad glanced at us once quick, nervous, and then looked away. I watched him more than I should have. He used to be this towering presence in my childhood, larger than life, untouchable. Now, he looked like a man who had finally realized the bank wasn't bluffing. The judge entered. We rose. The trial began. Greg stood first, steady, calm. No theatrics, just facts. He walked the court through the trust when it was written, how it was structured, Margaret's clear and repeated intentions to leave everything to Isla upon her 18th birthday. Then he laid out the timeline of betrayal, like stepping stones across a swamp. Isla turns 18. No money transferred. No notice sent. No contact from the trustees. Instead, a new kitchen remodel, a Caribbean cruise, an SUV gifted to Megan's teenage son, who didn't even have a license yet. We had receipts. Greg presented the video of Margaret next. I hadn't seen it in full before. She sat at her desk, hands folded, eyes clear. Isla understands money. She said. She listens. She asks questions. I see myself in her. She smiled just slightly and added, my other grandchildren want gadgets. Isla wants a future. I heard a few people in the courtroom murmur softly. Mom flinched. Their attorney took his turn. He tried every trick in the book. Margaret was old. She was emotional. She probably meant for the money to be shared eventually. He even said I'm not joking that we were misinterpreting generosity. Greg countered calmly, showed emails from Margaret instructing him not to disclose the trust contents until the transfer date to avoid guilt tripping, manipulation, or family drama. Guess she predicted this. Then came the numbers. Account balances, transfers, credit card expenses that lined up perfectly with the missing funds. The opposing lawyer's face started to sag with every projection. Finally, Greg asked the question no one had dared say aloud. If they planned to give Isla her inheritance, why didn't they tell her she had one? My father looked like he might speak. Then my mother elbowed him. Subtle, controlled. The judge noticed. Is there something you'd like to add, Mr. Brooks? My dad opened his mouth, then shut it again. Silence. Isla let out a single breath. It was barely audible, but it sounded like release. When Isla took the stand, everything in the room shifted. She wasn't loud. She didn't cry. She just told the truth in the plain, deliberate way only an 18-year-old who's been betrayed can. She described how she used to help Margaret balance checkbooks, how they played investment bingo, how she'd always been told money was tight so she never asked for anything, how she learned about the trust only after her surgery was already paid for by strangers. And then she said this, I used to think that not being chosen meant I wasn't enough, but now I know it just meant I wasn't convenient. You could have heard a pin drop. Even the stenographer paused for a second. The verdict didn't come that day. We waited a week. During that time, my parents tried one last tactic. They filed a motion requesting partial family settlement, offering to return some of the funds in exchange for dropping the rest. We declined. Isla barely blinked. I don't want hush money, she said. I want truth. When the ruling finally came, it was clear and final. Breach of fiduciary duty. Full restitution required. The judge ordered them to repay every cent. But here's the twist. They didn't have every cent. They'd spent a chunk of it enough that their current assets couldn't cover the balance. The court froze everything. Their house, their vacation home, their retirement accounts, the so-called art collection Mom used to brag about on social media, even her pearl necklace, the one she once said I'd never be classy enough to inherit. Gone. They moved into a rental a few blocks from a freeway, 1 bedroom, shared laundry. A neighbor told me they started selling furniture on Facebook Marketplace, 1 mirror, 2 lamps, the armoire that used to dominate their living room like a monument. They didn't speak to me. They didn't speak to Isla. But I heard through family that my mother told someone, she's tearing the family apart. Funny. She thought the rot was in the roots, but really, it had always been in the fruit. Isla didn't celebrate. She just looked calm, clean, like something had been surgically removed from her chest and replaced with air. They didn't just steal money, she said one night, curled up on the couch. They gambled with my life. And they're still mad that I won. I didn't argue. Because she was right. A week later, she asked Greg to move forward with the next step. The criminal case, he said. Yes, she replied. They committed a crime, and I'm done letting it go. Greg nodded slowly. It won't be easy. Isla met his eyes, steady, solid. I've already walked tougher paths. Filing the criminal charges wasn't as dramatic as you'd expect. No TV cameras, no slammed gavels. Just Greg, Isla, and me sitting in a beige office at the district attorney's building, the air stale with recycled heat and legal dread. Greg laid out the file. Isla spoke clearly. No hesitation. I sat back, watching her speak her truth, not as a victim, not as someone seeking pity, but as someone claiming what was stolen. The DA was young, sharp, asked smart questions. When we finished, he tapped his pen against the folder and said, "This isn't a misunderstanding. This is fraud, concealment, and breach of fiduciary duty with aggravating factors." Aggravating factors. That's legal speak for you knew better and did it anyway. The criminal complaint was filed 10 days later. Then came the storm. Someone we still don't know who leaked the civil case summary. Maybe a clerk. Maybe a cousin. Maybe someone who thought Isla's story deserved air. Within 72 hours, it was all over local media. Headlines like, "Grandparents accused of stealing granddaughter's inheritance while vacationing in Greece. From trust fund to betrayal, Colorado teen speaks out." People paid attention. Because we were living proof that you can't always trust family, and that sometimes the American dream isn't a white picket fence, it's a paper trail soaked in selfishness. The arraignment was surreal. My parents, now officially defendants, stood in front of a judge with their third attorney, this one quieter, older, and visibly exhausted. The charges were read out. Financial theft, intentional concealment of inheritance, misuse of trust assets, deception involving a legal heir. The judge asked how they pleaded. Not guilty, their lawyer said. I expected that. Isla didn't blink. But the judge's face said it all. You can plead whatever you want. We know what this is. Instead of handcuffs, they were released on bail. But the tone shifted. No more cruise brochures. No more brunch selfies. They were spotted wearing court-ordered ankle monitors at a local community center, where they were assigned community service. One photo made it online, my mom in a neon orange vest, glaring at a fast food wrapper on the sidewalk like it had personally insulted her, my dad holding a broom with the same energy he used to reserve for carving turkey, only now no one was applauding. We didn't share the photos, but we saw them. And yes, we felt something close to satisfaction. Not because they were suffering, because they were seen. 2 weeks into proceedings, Greg called me. Are you sitting down? He asked. Should I be? There's a new problem. Well, for them. Turns out, my parents had attempted to move funds from a hidden account, one they failed to disclose during the civil trial, into an offshore platform registered under my aunt's name. They tried to funnel it through a crypto exchange. But they left a digital trail. Greg had a copy. They violated a direct court order, he said. My throat went dry. What does that mean? It means we're filing again. The second criminal hearing was brutal fast-tracked because of the violation. The prosecution added charges of asset concealment, willful fraud post-verdict, attempted obstruction of restitution. This time, my parents showed up in the same outfits they wore for community service. No blazers, no pearls, just gray windbreakers and scuffed shoes. My mother said nothing. My father stared at the floor. Even their lawyer stopped smiling. The judge didn't take long. He reviewed the violation, the prior ruling, the financial trail. Then he looked at them and said, "You had a chance to show remorse. Instead, you chose deception again." He signed the sentencing order. 12 months. State facility. No suspension, no plea deals. I watched the bailiff walk toward them, watched as the handcuffs closed around the same wrists that once held my daughter when she was born. And this time, no one in the courtroom stood to protest. No one cried. No one begged for leniency. They were escorted out. Outside, reporters waited. Someone shouted Isla's name. She didn't flinch. She just walked past them, phone in hand, earbuds in. Not angry, not triumphant. Just forward. Later that night, Isla printed the final restitution report and placed it inside the compound project folder. She added another page behind it. A single sentence. This wasn't revenge. This was repair. Then she closed the folder and opened a new browser tab. I watched over her shoulder. She was registering a domain name. For the project, for the fund, for something beyond all this. Are you going to use the money now? I asked. She smiled. No, I'm going to grow it. The first day, Isla didn't wake up with a court date on her calendar. She made pancakes. No symbolism, no fanfare, just regular box mix, badly flipped, with blueberries on top. It was the most peaceful morning I'd seen in months. We didn't talk about the trial, or the restitution, or the social media chatter that still hadn't died down. We just sat in the quiet me, sipping lukewarm coffee, her humming to herself, hair pulled into a loose bun like she hadn't just dismantled 2 generations of silence. And then she asked me, casually,
Do you think forgiveness is necessary? I paused. For whom?
She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Later that day, she brought out the final manila folder, the one she kept in her desk drawer, under her laptop, and a pack of highlighters. On the front, in her small, clean handwriting, the Compound Project, Phase 1. Inside were pages she'd written by hand. Not for lawyers, not for court, but for herself. For us. The first page was a letter. Not to her grandparents, not to me. To other kids like her. If you're reading this, it means someone told you family is everything. That blood means loyalty. That silence means strength. That being good means being small. She crossed out being small and rewrote it in bold. That being good means disappearing. The next paragraph. I don't believe that anymore. I believe being good means standing up. I believe family isn't about DNA. It's about who shows up. I believe justice isn't always loud, but it always moves. And I believe your story doesn't have to end where theirs stopped caring. I read every word in that folder like it was a lighthouse. She registered Compound Project .org that same night. Not because she wanted attention, but because she wanted other teenagers with stolen futures to know they weren't alone. She uploaded her financial literacy videos, set up a page for anonymous legal resources, started a newsletter called The Second Inheritance, a collection of stories written by people who'd taken back control. The first issue. It was about Margaret.
There's a photo I keep on my desk now.
It's of Ela not at her graduation, not in court, but standing in front of a group of middle school girls at a community center in Denver. She's holding up a dollar bill. Her caption later read, "This isn't just money, it's math, memory, and power. Know what it's worth. Know what you're worth." Underneath the photo, she wrote 3 words. Legacy begins here. As for my parents, we haven't heard from them. Last I checked, they were still in that rental near the freeway. No more cruises, no more pearls, no more moral superiority on Facebook. The extended family divided, quietly. Some tried to stay neutral. Some sent vague thinking of you messages to Isla, the kind that smell like guilt, but arrived too late to be useful. We didn't reply. Because no one gets to pretend they stood by you when all they really did was scroll past your suffering. And me.
I didn't write them a letter.
I wrote one to myself. To the Helen who sat outside that hospital, staring at a limping pigeon, trying to will money into existence. To the Helen who begged for decency and got silence in return. To the Helen who once believed her parents' comfort mattered more than her daughter's spine. Here's what I told her. You did everything right. You worked. You showed up. You stayed quiet too long. But when it mattered most, you remembered who you were. Not their daughter. Isla's mother. There's something final about watching justice unfold in full. It doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't come with a soundtrack. It comes quietly, in emails, in court transcripts, in wire transfers and signed orders. It comes in the weight you no longer carry. It comes in sleep. The last page Isla added to her folder was handwritten, tucked between copies of court rulings and investment plans. Just one line. Some people don't deserve forgiveness, just consequences. And below that, in smaller ink, but I forgive myself for waiting so long to choose me. So, was it too far? Too harsh? Too public? You tell me. Because maybe you've been the quiet one too. The reliable one. The one who always paid the bills, picked up the pieces, kept the peace even when it cracked you open. Maybe you've stared down people who said, "We love you," right before they watched you drown. And maybe, like Isla, like me, you're ready to stop disappearing. Drop a comment. Tell me who you are or who you're becoming. And remember, being the bigger person doesn't mean being the silent one. Sometimes it means saying enough. This ends with me. Like, subscribe. And if this story finds someone who needs it, let it remind them. Justice isn't vengeance, it's finally being seen.